Welcome! My name is Marian Scales. I am a mental wellness coach with Dream Life Transformation, and I am here to talk to you about self-accountability and self-awareness. They're very, very important in making sure that your mental wellness and your mental health is in a good space, and they're keys to getting well, to overcoming challenges, and to navigating life in a way that works for you. You might be wondering why you should listen to me about any of this, and that's a really good question. I was diagnosed with ADHD, PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, major depression, dysthymia, and borderline personality disorder, and I self-diagnosed as autistic. With all of that going on, my mental health was not in a good place. I was in a toxic relationship. I did not have a good relationship with my family. I did not have a good relationship with myself. I did not have a good relationship with friends. I could not work. Every time I tried to work a job, I was only ever there for a few months, typically less than a year. Like, it was kind of a big deal if I made it to a year. And eventually, when I started getting into therapy, my therapist recommended that I apply for disability, and I did. And so I was on disability for 5 years while I worked through all of my stuff. I have been on medications in the past, and now I can happily and joyfully say that I am off of disability. I have been working full-time for the last 2 years. I am happy and thriving, and I am not taking any medication at all. And I'm no longer in therapy. So that's my story. That's part of my story, and that's, I had to do the work to get here. I had to do the work to get to this place where I could be functional and thrive and live a good life. So now I'm no longer in a toxic relationship. I am now happily single, and I have a really good relationship with my son and a good relationship with my family, and I have some really amazing friends, and I'm doing all sorts of things that I never thought that I could do, and that I never thought that I'd be able to do, and that I've always wanted to do. And so now I am here passing it forward so that other people who might be in a similar situation or might feel just very stuck in their lives can kind of find a way to navigate their way out of it to better, because better is absolutely 100% possible. So one of the first things that I had to do when I was getting serious about getting well was be very accountable to myself, and self-aware. I had to be very self-aware. I think that's the first piece. I had to be really self-aware about what was going on. And before I really understood what it meant, I was often saying, you are the only common denominator in your life. If your life is shit, why is that? Like, if your life is constantly shit, why is that? Like, if every relationship you have is terrible, what is going on inside of you that is attracting attracting that sort of life and attracting those relationships? And what is going on that you're not able to have and hold healthy relationships and a healthy mindset and feel good about yourself in your life? And that's not to say that the things that happen to you that put you in a place of being a victim or traumatized or hurt was your fault, because it wasn't. But it is your responsibility to heal it. It is your responsibility to transmute all of that and do the work that you need to be healed. Is that fair? Not necessarily, but life is not fair. So you are the only common denominator in your life. You are the only person, that is the only thing in your life that is always constant. Everything else can be stripped away completely and replaced with completely new things, and it is still going to be you. So whatever you have going on inside here is going to impact everything that's out here to one degree or another. That's really important, and that is something that I had to come to terms with and accept and really start digging into. So that self-awareness of like, oh, shit, maybe I'm the problem. And I was absolutely the problem in a lot of these relationships and in a lot of these situations. And it's not to say that, those people were great, that they didn't have their own stuff, and it's not to say that, that they weren't good people and that they weren't in their own way good friends, but there was a certain amount of toxicity that was constantly kind of happening. There's a lot of trauma bonding, a lot of, oh, this terrible, horrible, awful thing happened. Oh, this terrible, horrible, awful thing happened. And it was this kind of this perpetuating cycle of being in a victim mindset and a victim state and really just hating myself ultimately. Like, ultimately, I absolutely hated myself so much that I had no concept of how to not feel that way. Like, if you hate yourself, it's not likely that you're going to have things in your life that you love, that you really, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you don't like about your life if you don't like yourself. Finding where I was in all of this was really important, and being aware of where my patterns were. Why was I always going through cycles with emotionally unavailable and toxic men? Why was I having all of these trauma bonding toxic friendships? Why was I wanting to run away from myself all the time? Like, I was always trying to escape through acts of self-harm, through drinking, through drugs, through substance use. I was really trying to get away from myself. I could not stand being alone. And that was a key piece. Also, realizing that I never wanted to be alone, and then learning how to embrace that aloneness in the middle of everything feeling so awful was really powerful and really important. So being aware of your own patterns and your own cycles and why you're doing things and what your thought processes are, you want to become aware of your own thoughts, the words that you say to yourself. Like, I was constantly saying stuff, I hate myself, I hate this, I hate that, I'm a fat whore, I'm a horrible person, stupid slut, stupid bitch. Like, all of these negative things I was saying to myself in my mind all the time. And of course, so that's kind of what I felt like and how I felt, and that was just reinforced in the world around me. Even if other people didn't think those things, my perception said that perceived reinforced those beliefs. So the people around me didn't necessarily think and believe those things, but my perception did reinforce that belief. So I had to work through and get through, a lot of those layers and become aware of those patterns. And then I had to take accountability for it. And accountability is so important. It's when you actually start to take action and responsibility for what happened. That's where you're not responsible for what happened to you, but you are responsible for how you deal with it. You are responsible for the aftermath within yourself. You're not going to be able to change other people. You're just not. You're responsible for your triggers. You're responsible for your feelings and emotions. You're responsible for how you process and respond to everything. So, the self-awareness came when I first went into therapy. The therapist at the time started calling me out on my thinking. She pointed out to me that I would never use feeling words. Instead of saying, I feel sad, I would say things like, I feel like I want to cry. And she'd like, no, you're not using feeling words. Like, what are you feeling? So I had to start, really thinking about the way that I talk to myself and the way that I engage inside of me. Like, I did not want to feel anything. I was trying to numb out and escape because everything just hurt. It was just so awful. So I had to take accountability there and start noticing my own thoughts and then start changing it. So she had me start writing down. Anytime you have a negative thought, write it down. And I did. And I filled a journal full of it. And I had all of these different insights. And that's when I started really noticing how I talk to myself. And in noticing how I was talking to myself, I was able to start canceling that out. So, whenever I would say, I hate myself, I'd be like, no, that's not true. I love myself. And I started doing that, and that's really powerful. It takes time to change your thinking. So when you notice how you're thinking on the one side, you can cancel it out and replace it with what you do want. And it's a slow process. It is not going to happen overnight, and it's going to take a long time, because I started saying I love myself, and it was a year, almost a decade, before I actually really did truly love myself. So it takes time, but the more you commit to this and the more work you do around this is going to be it'll happen faster than you realize. You'll look up one day and be like, oh shit, like I don't even remember that person that I used to be. Like that is so far away. Like I can't believe how much I've changed and how much I've grown. Like my life doesn't resemble anything like that anymore. It is now completely different. As you start to do this, you start to become aware of how you're operating and how your patterns. So when I started noticing that I was always engaging with emotionally unavailable men, I was able to start distancing myself from dating in general while I figured out, reworked my process. That's something I'm still working on, but I'm in a much better place now. My interactions have significantly improved in my relationships. I now have actual friends. Most of the people that I knew and talked to when I was not in a well state, I don't talk to anymore. And it's not any malice, it's not any drama or anything that happened. But in some of those instances, I had to acknowledge that I was the toxic friend and, take accountability for that. Say, okay, yeah, I was not a good friend here. I was the toxic person in this situation. And that's not cool. So how can I be a better friend going forward? And in other ones, I realized that it just wasn't beneficial or reciprocal, and we just kind of grew apart. Nothing against anybody, but there just came a distance between us, and that's fine. And it's accepting that. It's accepting that some of your friendships, some of your relationships are gonna dissolve, and you're gonna separate, because that's what you need. It might be what you need, it might be what they need, but ultimately I just trust that it is all for my best and highest good. And now I have some really amazing friends from all over that I absolutely adore, and I'm able to really talk to them about things in my life, and it's not it's not trauma bonding, it's exciting, it's uplifting, it's empowering, it's accountability. So having those valuable relationships where I can really talk to people is really amazing, and it's really wonderful, but you have to get there. It takes time. And it could be that your current relationships evolve into that. I mean, it's not to say that they're going to be gone forever. It could just be that as you grow, they grow, which is always super cool to see. Taking accountability is also, de-triggering yourself. You're responsible for your triggers. I remember one time when I was kind of still in the process of healing, I was in getting help, but I was in this very tender state where everything was very triggering. Like it was like, oh, now I'm in a safe place. So now once you get into the safe space, you kind of fall apart. And so I was kind of in this falling apart state where everything was triggering, everything was upsetting to me, and it was like I said something to my mom. I was explaining to her, like, I need this and I need that to prevent me from being triggered. And she said, I don't know everything that you need. Like, I can't tiptoe around your emotions. And, of course, at the time, I didn't want to hear it. I felt like that was very unfair. But she was right. It is not other people's responsibility to manage your triggers. You have to manage your own triggers. You have to find a way to take care of yourself, to de-trigger. So you have to find a way where those things don't bother you anymore. They don't affect you in the same way. You have to find a way to, if you do feel triggered, to manage it in such a way where you can not suppress it and ignore it and pretend like everything's fine, but to address it in a way that it doesn't have you bleeding on everybody around you, so to speak, right? So, so that might look like somebody says something or does something, and may not even be intentional. It might just be completely unintentional, like not meant to hurt you, but it still hurts. And that might mean that you have to stand there and take a few deep breaths and walk away, where you can kind of process. I've done that before. When something hit me really hard in the core unexpectedly, I had to take several deep breaths and walk away and go process my feelings in a way that was transmuting them, in a way that was helpful, in a way that grounded me and did not have me reacting and taking all of that pain out on the other person. That's really important. And if somebody walks away from you because they're triggered because maybe you said something or did something, let them walk away. You can always come back and have that conversation when you're both in a calm state, but it is not, you don't want to go chasing after them. You want to give them that space and let them separate for a moment or a time until they are regulated. Because there's no good conversation that's going to happen when you're triggered. That's not to say you can't have conversations that you can't be emotional in a conversation. It is possible to have conversations and discussions when you are very emotional, as long as you can separate out your emotions from what is being said. Like, you can have your feelings as long as you can communicate and you can be receptive to listening to what other people have to say. I don't recommend it just because personal experience, I don't enjoy that kind of conversation, but sometimes it happens because I can be a very emotional person, and that's something that I know and accept about myself, and it is what it is. But it is my responsibility to manage those emotions so that it doesn't get, taken out on other people in a way that is negatively impacting the relationship or the other person's well-being or your own well-being. So some of the ways that we can maintain our self-awareness is by reflecting, like when something does happen and you feel that oof, oh, that was it. It's like, oh, okay, that's a feeling. Okay, I see it and I feel it and I acknowledge it. What's it telling me? Okay, like getting really curious about it without any judgment. You want to have a lot of compassion for yourself in this process. That's really important, because you need to be able to give yourself compassion, because not everything is always going to need to be fixed. Not everything is always going to need to be addressed. Not everything is always going to need to be healed. Not everything is always going to need to have something done with it. So just being able to compassionately hold space for whatever you're going through and whatever you felt and whatever you experienced in a way of calm awareness is really powerful. And taking accountability is very essential, and that takes practice and it takes time. I'm sure you might have noticed at periods of time when you are triggered and you're freaking out and you're lashing out, whether in anger or in fear or in just you're hurt and you're wounded, whatever it looks like. I'm sure that you have probably experienced in the back of your mind this little tiny voice of awareness, this rational voice being like, why are you like this? Like, what is going on? I don't want to be reacting this way. And that is your self-awareness kicking in. And that doesn't always mean that you can that you'll be able to regain control in the moment. If you want to do what you can to regain control, but I know from personal experience that takes time and practice, and that sometimes we do lose control, and we have to acknowledge, like, that was not cool. That was unacceptable. And then we need to work to prevent that from happening again. Because it is very easy to take out our triggers on the people closest to us. You know, when we're caught in a state of reacting instead of responding, it's very easy to take things out on the people closest to us, and that is not good. That's not healthy. That is very toxic and very abusive, even if we don't mean it to be, but it is. So it's up to us that to, you know, in the context of what should otherwise be a healthy relationship, to pull ourselves back and examine that, and like that's where that compassion is going to come in. You pull yourself together, you go have some quiet alone time where you cry or you feel, you reflect, you journal, you do whatever it is that you need to do to bring yourself into a calm state and find solutions to prevent you from having that reaction. So that might mean scheduling an appointment with your therapist. That might mean making sure that your medications are correct if you're on medication or feel like you need medication. That might mean meditating. It might mean journaling. It might mean doing some really deep breathing exercises. It might mean taking a shower or a bath. It's whatever process works for you. That's what you want to use. That's what you want to get you to help prevent that from happening again. And like, you want to kind of look at it and be like, what was the trigger? Like, what was going on with me that I was not doing well in that situation? What was that about? Why was that happening like that? And, you know, and go in and pour love into that trigger. Pour love into that space. Pour love into that version of you that was hurting, and go follow that thread back to the beginning. You don't always need to go back to the root cause of your triggers. It's not always necessary. Sometimes, if it's something that you can do and you think will be helpful, you know, absolutely do it. But if you're able to move on without opening up those old wounds, then that's fine too. You don't have to always go into it. For me personally, I typically try to go to the root of it, wherever that root is, and, you know, pull out the weed completely and pull out the rocks and like whatever is in there, so that I can, you know, plant something new, plant a new seed. So find the method that works for you. There's a lot of different methods. There's a lot of different ways. The most important thing is consistency and commitment to yourself and to your growth and to your healing. So, yeah, I think that's about all I have to say on the matter. I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to sharing this journey with you. I'm super excited. You can check out my website, dreamlifetransformation.com. I post free challenges that you can sign up for, and group coaching programs, and solo coaching programs. So feel free to go check that out, and be sure to follow me here, and you can follow me at Dream Life Transformation on Facebook. For my business page and my personal page is Marian Scales, and you can also find me on Instagram, Dream Life Transformation and The Wooded Witch, and then on TikTok, Dream Life Transformations. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And if you tried any of these suggestions or have any experience, be sure to leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. If this was helpful,